I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Angela.
We are the Ink Mages. Join us as we discuss all things fantasy, world building, storycraft, myths and legends, and of course, our own imaginative stories. Hello, and welcome to the Ink Mages podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about mythical creatures. We love mythical creatures, and some of us have loved them since childhood. So, we are going to talk about our favorite ones that stood out to us, and the mythical creatures that appear in our stories. So, Angela, let's start with you. Take us back to your childhood and your love of fantasy, and which creatures stood out to you the most?
Well, my love of all things fantasy started very early. I watched The Dark Crystal, which fascinated me. And a lot of the creatures in The Dark Crystal, Jim Henson, like those were his own creation. But then I also watched a lot of the Rankin Bass cartoons. Those of you who are fans, let us know. The Last Unicorn, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and also my favorite, which isn't as well known, but the Flight of the Dragons, which was really what first captured me with dragons. You had all these different wizards and they each had a different dragon. And I loved the animation. I was captured even as a young little child. I loved to draw and illustrate. And these cartoons by Rankin Bass just captured my imagination like no other. You had The Last Unicorn with the Red Bull and a beautiful depiction of a unicorn. In fact, I think even to this day, my favorite depictions of unicorns are not when they're just the white horse with a horn. It's the ones that look more ethereal, almost like another creature. And I think that's what I loved about The Last Unicorn, was that you had this unicorn. It was more slender. It had cloven hooves. It had a different look. It didn't look like a horse. And I love The Last Unicorn. I watched that over and over and over again. In fact, a little bit of a rabbit trail. But there's such a funny scene in The Last Unicorn. If you've never seen it, you should. But Schmendrick the magician and Molly, who's one of the characters, they go and they meet this band of thieves in the forest, almost like Robin Hood and his merry men. And while they're sitting around the campfire, the leader says, "Would you like a taco?" And I always thought, a taco. Even when I was a kid, I'm like, this is like fantasy, medieval era kind of a taco. And it was so funny. Later on I went and bought the book because it is actually a book that was put into a movie form. And in the book, it says the same thing. So any of you who have ever wondered like where the taco came from, it was actually written in the actual storybook as well. And here it is, just kind of a fun fact.
Oh my
And
God, that's so funny. I don't remember that. I only
yeah,
saw The Last Unicorn once. So I'm the person who didn't get to necessarily enjoy some of these classic cartoons with magic and mythical creatures until adulthood. So I think I saw it because I was babysitting some younger kids and they wanted to watch The Last Unicorn. I was like, okay, let's give it a try.
oh my gosh, I love that, especially because when I grew up, you didn't have on-demand TV, and The
No.
Last Unicorn was one of those specials that would come on regularly on Channel 10. And the Red Bull was so scary. The king in his castle was wiry and horrifying. And there was a beautiful love story of this beautiful mythical creature. And it was a very emotionally charged story. And I just loved it so much. But yeah, that taco scene was always like, taco, just so strange. I used to like rewind it. We go to the store and rent those. We had to rent the VHS players, and that we would rent The Last Unicorn because we loved it so much. And I would rewind that scene over and over again because I thought it was so funny that he asked them if they wanted a taco.
Now
Anyway,
I can't remember. In that story, was the unicorn actually like a woman? I couldn't remember if I have my stories correct. If like at the end she actually could take on a human form
so
or
what
not.
happens is the Red Bull, who's kind of the main villain of the story, is captures all of the unicorns and has driven them all into the sea. And she is the last of them.
Oh,
And
okay.
she leaves her enchanted forest, which is kind of a protected sanctuary because she wants to find the rest of the unicorns. On this journey, she meets Schmendrick the magician, and he's kind of this clumsy magician
Yes.
that doesn't quite accomplish any real magic that's
No.
worth anything. And she wants to go find the rest of the unicorns. He decides he's going to help her. And one of the things he has to do, and this is one of the times when his magic actually becomes effective, is the Red Bull is coming after her and she's doomed. So he transforms her into a woman in order to save her and fool the Red Bull. So this is part of the premise. So she becomes this woman, but she's a unicorn. She's not human. And then there's the love story where this beautiful prince falls in love with her,
Mhm.
but she's a unicorn. She's not a human. And she
Oh, okay.
becomes conflicted over the fact that she either becomes a human forever or she returns to being a unicorn again. So very good story. I love it. The book's fun to read. I read it to my children. Has a lot of really big words in it because it was written a while ago, but it's still a really great read. And then there was The Flight of the Dragons, which is funny. It was an early like Dungeons and Dragons game where this young kind of nerdy guy gets swept up into a world full of mythical creatures and beasts, and the dragons being the main characters of the battle that's going on in this world. And just the beauty of dragons captured me. Oh, and then on top of that, just being a child of the 80s and Clash of the Titans and all the stop motion animation with all of the great Leviathans and Pegasus and all of these mythical creatures. I just couldn't get enough of them, honestly. I've loved mythical creatures and mythology. I think it helped me even with my love of history, because history to
Mhm.
me is hand in hand with mythology. And I remember one time listening to these old men, they were these scholars. I can't remember, it was like a class I was watching, and they were talking about the connection between the biblical Nephilim and a lot of the heroes of Greek mythology and some of these mythical creatures. And this was the interpretation, the myths and legends were the interpretation of like some of these Nephilim creatures. And anyway, it was a very interesting conversation. Of course, it fascinated me because I loved mythical creatures so much. So anyway, what was some of the first inspiration or some of your favorites growing up or when you first started to love mythical creatures?
Well, so I think my love for mythical creatures kind of came later, probably once I actually saw Lord of the Rings. Um, because before that, I had never heard of Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, but I was familiar with Narnia at a young age. So that at least I had those stories that I could read. So my first exposure with like a dragon, I think was Eustace
Oh,
in
yes. My favorite dragon
yeah,
of all time.
the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which still remains one of my like favorite childhood books of all time. And I just love that he got okay. If you haven't read it, shame on you. It's a classic. But he gets turned into a dragon. And God, did he need to? Because he was such a brat. Hysterical. Like, I love the movie version of Eustace's betrayal. Like the kid did an amazing job. But he's just a brat, a punk, like always so sassy. So when they get to that one island, and I think there was a dragon that used to roost there because there was all that gold. So Eustace takes something, and in Lord of the Rings and a lot of dragon mythology, there's always some type of sickness or lust for gold that
Mhm.
is on a horde. So Eustace ends up getting turned into a dragon. And I don't think, I couldn't remember, could he talk? I don't think he could
He
explain
couldn't
that he was
communicate.
Eustace. He
No.
couldn't communicate. And so I think they try to like hurt him, kill him, like it's a dragon trying to get on our ship. So poor dude, he's misunderstood now and has to just kind of let people like help him, I guess, and which he's
Mhm.
not used to doing that. But I think what stood out to me the most is when he gets changed back. And the
Such a
book
powerful scene.
and the book is so beautiful because he knows that he can't do it himself. Like he is
Yes.
turned into this beast from his own behavior and that selfishness that was bedded inside him. So he can't do it on his own. And so Aslan is going to help him, but it's like he doesn't do it for Eustace completely. He starts by like clawing, I think, at his scales.
Mm-hmm.
And once that starts, then Eustace is able to do it himself and like break off his dragon scale so he can go back to being a real boy. So a lot of spiritual allegory happening in that scene. And as a kid reading it, I was just like, man, this
Oh my
is
gosh, that
amazing.
that part in that book, I think I read it and reread just that part like 3 or 4 times because it was so powerful. Eustace being the worst character quickly
Mm-hmm.
becomes my favorite
Yeah.
character because of this whole circumstance.
Because he changes, he goes through growth. He recognizes that what he was doing was wrong, that his behavior towards everybody was wrong, and he needed to change. And in order to do that, he had to like do that hard work because it was hard to rip off the scales that were grafted onto him. But
Yeah.
you need help too, so you can't do it on your own. He needed the help of Aslan. So yeah.
Well, and that's one thing I love about C.S. Lewis. I think he was probably one of the original that captured my imagination as well with mythical creatures. I mean, you've got your dryads and your naiads and your tree nymphs. There was something about those things when I was a kid. I wanted to know more about them. They were things that I should be able to know more about. It was never just okay for an author or a storyteller or a movie to just mention these creatures and for me to be like, okay, whatever. And I was like, I need to know all about them. I need to know
Mm-hmm.
where they came from. What did they look like? What do they do? What kind of magic do they have? Where can I find one? I think I read these books when I was a kid. They were called serendipity books. And they were my favorite books. They always either had some kind of mythical creature or an animal that had to learn a lesson. So there was always a
Mm.
moral at the end. And again, they were beautifully illustrated. Anything that was beautifully illustrated for me as a kid was like instant connection.
Instant love.
Yeah, instant love. And the Serendipity books even started with the character Serendipity, who was the Loch Ness monster. And she was all lonely, and
Oh,
her lesson was learning to have friends. And anyway, there was my favorite one was called Dragalyn, and it was about a little baby dragon. And
cute.
at the end of the story, when we're learning the moral and the lesson and what Dragalyn had to learn, there is one little quip, and it shows this willow tree, and underneath it is hidden a little baby dragon, and it says, underneath every willow tree is hidden a baby dragon if you look hard enough. And for some reason, as a kid, that stuck in my head so solidly that every single time, even now as an adult, when I see a willow tree, I'm looking for that baby dragon that is
Oh.
hidden under the willow tree. In fact, even with my kids, whenever we drive by, they even say now, Mom, where's the hidden dragon under the willow tree? Because I would say that all the time to them, like, guys, look for the hidden baby dragon under the willow tree.
Oh, that's so cute. Yeah. You love dragons. I love dragons. They can be bad or good. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. In a story, I will love them both. As a video gamer, I love fighting dragons. I think probably the first dragon I fought was in Zelda Ocarina of Time, and it's one of my favorite battles. It's like you're in this fire temple and there's lava everywhere, and this
Let's
very
go.
Japanese like dragon because it doesn't have like the wings. It's very serpent like. So it like rises up out of the lava and just like circles around you, and it's like raining hailstone, fiery hailstone on top of you, and all you have is this giant hammer,
Yes.
you know, and you have to like wait till time it right and then smash his head. It's like this is epic. And when it screams, it's just like this unearthly hoarse scream. I was like, this is so cool. So I was sneaking in
There's
some
something
magical dragon stuff behind the scenes.
There's something about dragons because they're wise. Even if they're evil, it's like they know something. They're
Because they
timeless. They've been
live.
around.
They've
Yes,
lived a long time.
they've been around. Even Smaug, that's what's so amazing about him is like there's this agelessness and this knowledge and wisdom that's coupled with his choice to be evil and to hoard all of this gold and to chase people out of the mountain and kind of lord over them. And there's something about a dragon to me that has so much mystique. I love them. And I always want to believe they were real. There were dinosaurs, there could have been dragons. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
pterodactyls could fly, who knows? I love that movie, Reign of Fire. Did you ever see that one with Christian
Yes.
Bale and
Oh
Matthew
yeah,
McConaughey?
that's like what a post-apocalyptic dragon world. A unique
Yes.
take. I liked it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that movie because the whole premise was there were dragons. They just
Yep.
had fallen asleep. They were hibernating under the earth. And of course, some miners were down there, banging on things, broke
Digging.
through their nest where they were sleeping. And then there was this dragon apocalypse because they woke up and here come the dragons. And it was just such a fun, like, yeah, dragons exist kind of, big
Yep.
scary dragons. Again, these timeless creatures that had been reawakened. And I loved that movie. I love anything with dragons. If you show me a movie trailer or a book and it's got a dragon on it, in
You're
fact,
sold.
yes, fun tip. If you are a fantasy writer and you're trying to get that cover done for your book, it is important if there is a dragon in your book, even if it's small, you want to depict that on your cover because people do love dragons so much that if they see that dragon on your cover, they're going to want to buy it. So, fun tip, be sure to include that dragon on your cover, even if it's a small detail, so that people will want to buy that book.
Yes, that is a good tip.
I've got dragons on my cover, so.
You do. I do not, because not to say that there aren't dragons in my world, my fantasy world. They just, yeah. It's kind of like a hidden thing. So I do have wyverns. So that is kind
Those
of like a
count.
dragon.
Yeah.
Kind of like a dragon. They just don't have like four legs. I think typical dragons usually have 4 legs plus the wings.
Yes.
A wyvern is smaller, and it's usually its 4 arms are attached to the wings.
Yes.
So
And they're
they're
usually
cool.
smaller and more
Yeah.
animalistic, whereas a dragon kind of has wisdom or could speak or
Yeah.
has some
Yeah.
kind of magic.
Intelligent.
Yes. And wyverns tend to be just more of a scary reptile flying creature, which is still a mythical beast. I mean, it counts.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yeah. And I do have a couple of the wyverns in my adult fantasy series. So yeah, they appear. They're like frost wyverns. They'll blow
Ooh.
frost breath and freeze things.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I'm excited to read that. I haven't read of your wyverns yet.
No, they come a little bit later. But I also have a drake. So in The Conjurer's Curse, I do have a land drake, because not all drakes are dragons with wings and breathe fire. There are drakes that are kind of like a reptile, like a dinosaur in a sense. And funny thing is, I've been playing God of War Ragnarok, and I had to do this whole quest where I fight some dragons and I take out some drakes. And I like that there was a difference, that the dragons flew and had wings and they breathed fire, but then there was just land drakes that nope, no fire. They just, would come out of the ground a little bit, stomp around, and you had to find a way to defeat them. So I do have a drake in The Conjurer's Curse, and it operates more kind of like that, but different. I was inspired by, I think there's an insect that
Oh,
I forget what it's called, but it would create a sand trap.
yeah.
And I can't, it's not like an ant lion, because that's an animal that eats ants, right? Okay.
Yeah, but they do that. They do. I think antlions do. They dig and then there's a little tunnel and everything kind of collapses in
Yeah.
with them.
So I was thinking kind of like that, but instead having a reptile that burrows under that sand trap. So anything that falls in, it's just like, yep, scoop it up. Thank you. But if you escape, well, Grace, then it's going to have to breach the sand trap and come after you. So yeah, tough hide, a tongue, like very much like a frog.
I love
Can
it.
snatch things. So I embellished. I came up with my own idea, and that's the beauty of writing fantasy. Like, you can take the notion of a dragon or a drake and then splice it with different creatures or even animals in our world and come up with something really unique. So that's what I did with my drake.
I love it. That scene in The Conjurer's Curse in when they're in the sand. That's a very like tense, action-packed, fun scene. And again, it's so fun when you introduce a mythical creature or a monster, because this one's definitely that combo of mythical creature and monster feel where
Yeah.
you're leaning in, biting your your fingernails, and very well written scene. I actually look forward to that scene every time I read the Conjurer's Curse because it's so epic.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so let's see. Another creature that I really like is a griffin.
Oh my gosh, yes, they're so
They're
beautiful.
okay, so one of my favorites. We all love dragons, but if I had to choose like my favorite mythical creature that's not a dragon, it'd be a griffin. And I think in Narnia there was a griffin. So I'm trying to think
Mhm.
of like my first understanding of where the first time I saw a griffin, and definitely reading Narnia. There, I think there's one in there, and then in the movie there's a griffin, and the way they rendered the griffin just looks so cool. It's like yes.
Yes.
So yeah. And I guess, well, I'm going to just say it. So in my adult fantasy series, eventually I will have, a shaper that might be able to kind of shapeshift into a griffin. So,
Woo! Yay! Come on.
yay. I mean, what? It's the body of a feline creature, lion, possibly, with an eagle. Hmm. So it seems perfect.
Yeah, and they
I
have
have
that.
to do it.
Yes, and they have that incarnation in Harry Potter with the hippogriff. There's just something so majestic about a half lion, half eagle. They're just
It's a powerful combination. I mean, you
yes.
have eagles, which are, like lords of the sky, and then lions, which are king of the jungle. So it's like two powerful creatures spliced together. That's going to be a formidable enemy or foe. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a foe, but like it's going to be a formidable creature if it's good too.
Yeah, I definitely love all of those. I think some of my favorite are some of the Celtic incarnations of mythical creatures. You see them in J.R. Tolkien with the Ents, but these tree spirits, or what some people call the Green Man, which is basically this
Oh,
tree spirit that guards the forests. And there's something to me so fascinating, almost fairy-like, about the Green Man and these trees that had wisdom and could speak and move and were coupled with this giant mythology. I've always loved the whole idea of a giant and all of those kinds of things that come along with whether they're part of the forest as a guardian, like a tree ent, or a terrifying man eating giant like Jack and the Beanstalk. And I've
right.
always wanted to go down that rabbit trail of where giants came from to begin with, this whole concept of giants. Because especially if you look into Celtic mythology and you look into a lot of the old, like English fairy tales, there's a lot of giants in them. So I've been kind of fascinated to go down that rabbit trail a little bit and maybe incorporate something like that a little bit more into my books. There is a little sneak peek of a Green Man incarnation and like creature in book 3, but I wanted to kind of dive down that a little bit more because I've just kind of been fascinated by this idea of tree spirits and fairy creatures and the other world, which is huge in Celtic mythology. Just
Hmm.
this whole other world that exists underneath hills where that comes to life, a whole other world with fae and fairy creatures. And I think I spent a lot of my childhood drawing all of my different incarnations of fairies that were shaped like leaves that fell off of trees and things like
Oh,
that. So I've always been fascinated with forest mythical creatures.
yeah, it's amazing how much of what we consider fantasy, especially like medieval fantasy, European fantasy, it takes so much roots from the Celtic myths.
Mhm.
I mean, all the little things that you were saying that you loved about Narnia and like the nymphs and the naiads, is that what you called them?
The naiads and the dryads, like what
Not
are those?
dryads, naiads. Okay, like I feel like they're probably things straight from Celtic mythology. And of
Yeah.
course, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien are going to take from their own, the origins of their country. And of course, Tolkien takes a lot from Norse mythology.
Yes.
So I love Celtic, but I also love Norse mythology a lot too. And so, been playing that God of War game. It's been the most fun part has been all the mythical creatures that I get to fight, but also learn about. So like after I like defeat a creature, I get to like, ooh, here's all this lore about it. I'm like, dude, so there really was this wolf called Garm that I fought that could open up rips rifts in the realms, and like that's how you could travel. I'm like, dude, this is epic. There's like stags, like all the seasons
Yes.
for the stags that like live in Yggdrasil. I had to like round them up because they got loose. I just think this is so sweet. I love how immersive, a story can be, taking from our own myths, from
Yes.
different cultures. And Norse is just, there's a plethora of things. They have their dragons, they have their giants too, and the
Yep.
giants are, their background is different from like Celtic
Yes.
giants. Yeah, they're a whole race. They weren't always seeing, they were at odds with the Asgardians and the Aesir, and there's wars between them. Like they were an intelligent race. They could shapeshift too. Like there's a lot. There's just a lot there, and it's fascinating.
Yes, it is. It's fun to just see all the different incarnations from different literature, different myths, legends, movies, video games. And there's something that just is so, I don't know. I think for me, even that's why I love being a storyteller and love writing stories. I want to know more. I think that's where I got so nerded out with J.R.R. Tolkien is he had written whole histories of his world and a whole mythology about his world that made it even more interesting and real. And I think I've always been captured by that idea of creating something as though it really existed. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where, even within my own stories, that was my why, one of my whys in writing my stories. I'm like, this is the real history. This is how it would have actually been. And that is even with my mythological creatures. I really pulled in trying to create this reality of what it would have really been like, what people would have really seen, what they would have thought a unicorn was or thought a dragon was.
Mm.
And in my story, I have a unicorn and it's called Gwyrthrod. It's a good Welsh word for you. And it actually means miracle worker or
Neat. Oh
messenger.
wow.
And so I actually kind of put those words together, made it a mouthful for my
Mm.
readers to have to try to say that name. But I wanted to think of this idea of guardians of different forests or different areas and how they weren't just seen by everybody, but they were spirit.
Mm.
So instead of there being just this mythical creature that existed in a forest, it was more like a spirit, like angelic entity. And
Mm.
in my story, I call it an Eneid, which in Welsh is angel or spirit. So an Eneid, it could be a demon,
Mm.
it could be an angel.
Oh.
And so these Eneid, so I have my character who's from, she's a time traveler. So she's traveled to the past, she's experiencing this, and she sees this creature because her eyes, the veil has been lifted. She's able to see this spirit that not everyone can see. And she's like, it's a unicorn. And nobody knows what she's talking about. They're like, it's not
That's
a
right.
unicorn, it's an Eneid. And so they don't have necessarily all of the attachments that we would have with all of these mythical creatures, all of the same
Mm-hmm.
ideas that have evolved into the future time. And what happens is these innate or these spirits become messengers or become activated and are only seen at particular times by certain people, or if everyone sees them, it's because that they've broken through the veil, so the veil of the
Mm-hmm.
other world, so that they can be seen. And my dragon, which I couldn't wait to write my dragon. She's definitely one of my favorite creatures that I wrote in my book. And
She's the
she's
best.
also, I love her. She's got
I
kind of
love her.
an attitude. She, definitely doesn't have an issue with crunching up humans, though she doesn't eat them, but, she gets a little miffed with them too. She doesn't have the patience for humankind.
Yeah, so well, that's a great balance because when she's speaking, I'm so enraptured in what she has to say because there's this timeless wisdom about her. But then there's times where it's like, she's a dragon. It's like that Aslan thing, like, well, he's not always a tame lion. So you have to
Yes.
remember that, yes, this dragon has lived forever and has all this, not forever, but has all this wisdom and knowledge and magic about her. But then she's doing something that's just very dragon-like, like a beast.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Like thinking about crunching someone's bones,
Yeah.
or I've always wanted to kind of write a short story of her origin a little bit. I thought that would be kind of a fun thing to do at some point. But she's also an Eneid. So she's one that's
Okay.
busted through the veil. When her character is being introduced, she's actually fading away. She's kind of going to sleep because, again, she's not a living, breathing creature. She is spirit. So when she goes to rest, she kind of disappears into the landscape, becomes like a hill or a mountain, kind of disappears behind the veil into the other world. But she chooses, or actually, I'm not giving it away what happens, but she comes and is revealed to the natural world. And her name is Gwylir, which means guardian.
Cool.
And
Mm.
if her full name is Gwylir Alres, which is golden guardian. And I love the idea that something like that could exist, that
Mhm.
mountains and hills and trees could have once been a mythical creature that existed, lived, breathed, maybe still has the essence of a spirit dwelling within it. And so that's how I wrote a lot of my creatures, as though they did exist. And we may have interpretations of them now in the future time of them being unicorns and dragons, but they were spirits. And that's why we don't see the remains of all these mythical creatures, because they are spirit and not actual physical beings.
Mm. That's a cool way of thinking about it, because you would think if dragons did exist, would we have found fossils and bones of them? But maybe if they were actually spirit,
Yes.
then they just go dormant. And I love that, how you do it in the story, where maybe they just become a landscape. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that is something that's true with like the Celtic myths too. If that was something when a creature like a dragon or an wood, when it's going to pass, it goes and finds a place and then just will perish, but then the landscape grows over it. Do you know if that's kind of a thing?
There's a lot about kind of creatures that have kind of faded into the background, and a lot about landscapes like the other world. You go to Scotland and even Ireland, it's interesting. A lot of the people there still believe in fairies.
Mm.
In fact, they don't appreciate when you kind of ha 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 and laugh like, you believe in fairies? They're like, yes, I saw one just the other day. You're like, oh, okay, I'm sorry.
It's
But
like the Peter Pan thing. Yes, I do believe in fairies. I
yes,
do. Yeah.
they're real.
Yeah.
And these mounds that exist, these landscapes that are markers for the other world, or ancient trees, hills. I know in Norse mythology, you've got a lot of mountains that could have been giants or
Mm.
trolls that have become
Yeah.
inanimate, that anytime they could just shake off the rocks and the dirt and come back to rule and reign. And this is
Hmm.
kind of my idea. I think oh gosh, what's the name of that movie with the black dragon? It's animated. Um,
Oh, like Toothless.
yes,
Are you meaning? Okay, How to Train Your
yes.
Dragon. Yeah, I'm
How to
glad
Train Your Dragon.
touched
Thank
you
you.
touched on that, because I want a Toothless.
Oh my
I
gosh.
wanted a Toothless since I saw the movie for the first
Yes,
time
all of the
as an
different
adult.
dragon incarnations are just so fascinating. And I remember one time my son had gotten a book that had all of these different dragons that didn't even make it into the movie. They're probably part of the book series.
Mhm.
And there was one in particular that could camouflage itself as a tree or a hill. And
What?
I remember
That's
seeing that
cool.
and I went, I'm doing that.
Mm.
I'm doing
Mhm.
that sometime, except that's what they actually become as they kind of fade or disappear. So that was kind of where
Mhm.
that idea originally came from, was
I
from
love
How to
it.
Train Your Dragons.
Oh, yeah. I feel like we could have a whole episode just about that movie series. I never read the books, but
Yeah, no, I haven't either.
I'm such a huge fan.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun because it's dragons and it's the
I
humans being
know.
able to interact and
It's
become
Vikings
connected to
and
dragons.
dragons.
Oh gosh, I mean, dream come true right there, right? I think
Right
that's what
there.
I loved about the Rankin Bass cartoon Flight of the Dragons. Was there were these wizards that actually had these partnerships with
Mm.
dragons, and you're like, ooh, how cool would that be? To have
Yeah.
this partnership with a mythical creature that was your own, like I had a
Yeah.
hippogriff at my beck and call. It was assigned to me to partner with me in life. I mean, how neat is that?
Didn't that happen, something like that, in the Merlin BBC show, where it gets to a point where Merlin realizes that he was like a dragon lord? There was a title they had for it, a dragon master or something. And depending on they had that ability with their speech, they could command the dragons. I was like, dude.
Yes.
That's cool. So it made me wonder if maybe at one point in time, like the old, wizards, because I'm sure they used a term for them on that show, but they might have actually had companions, like dragon companions.
Yeah, let's
That would be cool.
go. I know that the Aragon series, I think I've only read the first
Does
book,
that? Yeah.
has that kind of idea where you have this dragon that you are connected with from it hatching from an egg, and it's you and the dragon are one now. You're not
Hmm.
you're inseparable, and the dragon can't even live without its master anymore. If the master were to die, the dragon were to die. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know. It's a fun thing to think about because dragons are so powerful and so mystical and so just extraordinary. I loved that movie when I was a kid, Dragonheart. I think Dennis
Yeah.
Quaid was in it.
Yep. And David Thewlis. Oh man,
Oh
he was like
yes,
he was young. He
throwback.
was that throwback. Yes, for sure. But dang, yeah, that was a cool one. I only saw the first movie because I think that was probably the best.
Yes, I just think it's such a fun part of storytelling to imagine worlds where we get to belong with these mythical creatures, and then you've got the scary ones, like you have all the incarnations of mermaids where
Oh yeah,
they're more like
they'll drag a ship
sirens,
now.
or yeah, they drag people down to the depths. They're not these beautiful, lovely Barbie doll
Maidens.
creatures that.
No.
And then I
Yeah.
think my favorite mermaid incarnation is again going to the Celtic mythology, but the Selkie,
Yeah, the
where
silky.
they sing and they turn into seals and they swim around. So
Hmm.
seals are actually these women that
Yes.
sing. They transform. I think it's at night, and in the day they transform
Hmm.
back into seals and swim in the about the water. And there's something again very cool about that
Yes.
mystique.
Yes, and there's a beautiful animated movie that has that whole legend of the Selkie, and is it called The Song of the Sea? Or
Yes, it's so good.
oh, it's just beautiful, and you get to learn about even the lore, the more Celtic lore on the fairies too, and the underworld. Because I think at one point, like the kids travel through the land of the fairy to try to get back, and yeah, the sisters of Selkie. Oh, it's just
Yeah, and
such a
again, you've got a
sweet,
big
sweet
god
movie.
who's turned into a
Mhm.
rock that's in the sea.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but again, another one of those movies that I watched while um watching children.
Yes, yeah,
I
that's
just
definitely one of my
discovered.
favorites.
Yes, it's a beautiful one. So definitely recommend. I recommend that movie for sure.
Yes, and that will touch adults, children. It's a
Hmm.
very heart-filled story. I love that. I love that movie so much. We watch it every St. Patrick's Day. So
Oh, look at you! You made a tradition out of it.
yes, very familiar with that movie. That one in Waking Ned Divine, but
I
that's
don't. I'm not familiar with that one,
oh,
but
you've got to. That's a rabbit trail. But if you haven't seen
okay.
Waking Ned Divine, watch it on a St. Patrick's Day. You'll laugh, you'll roll. It's a good time. Thank you for joining us as we've talked all things mythical creatures. We had so much fun. I think we could go on and talk about
Mhm.
all of the different stories, video games, and movies that we watch with mythical creatures. They capture us. They're fascinating. They're fantastic. And I can't get enough of them personally. Please be sure to join us. We have some great interviews coming up with some fabulous fantasy authors. We cannot wait to get to know them and introduce them to our audience. We also have more fun episodes planned as the holidays are kicking off. We also want to let you know that Stephanie and I both have swag shops. If you would like to get some of our swags, look at the links below. It's almost Christmas time. It is sweater weather. So there might just be
Yes.
something that you would like to buy or pull from. Yep, there we go. She's got some of her swag on right there.
Yep.
And so be sure to check out those links, maybe buy something for somebody you love, or if you love our books and just want to display your fandom, we will not stop you. Please leave a like, leave a comment, let us know what your favorite mythical creature is, and for sure be ready to join us for all that's coming up soon here on the Ink Mages. We'll see you later. Have a good day.